It's your bear here, and I'm going to be talking about every single sorceress in Final Fantasy VIII. Not just the ones you know, but the entire succession of witches. So let's get into it. The whole world starts with Hyne. He plays a significant role in the game's history, particularly as the creator of both humanity and the sorceresses. Now, there are two legends offered in-game which speak about the Great Hyne. The first time you hear about him is in Balam Town, and the second is when you encounter the White Seed ship after freeing Edea. Both stories describe a similar series of events. Millennia ago, there was a god named Hyne. He created self-replicating tools. He created humanity. This was so that he could rest after a long battle with the other gods. When he finally awoke, Hyne found that human beings had increased their numbers, spread around the globe, and shaped the environment to suit their needs instead of his. Hyne was startled by these changes, as well as the sheer number of humans which now existed. He didn't like the way the world had changed while he slept, and he decided to reduce humanity's population. Hyne struck first, using his magic to set fire to the world's children. This surprise attack by their ancient god upset humanity, and now Hyne and his creations were at war. But after a long series of battles, it became clear that Hyne could not win. Humanity had grown too clever and too numerous while he slept. To bring about an end to the war, Hyne offered half of his body and powers as a gift to humanity. The kings of man accepted this gift, but quickly began to fight over who would control this great new power. But his gift had been a trick. Hyne had only given humanity his skin, and this new entity had no real power of its own. Furious, humanity set out to destroy Hyne, but Hyne himself was nowhere to be found. He had run away with the rest of his body, and not quite all of his power. No one is certain who was the first to become a sorceress, only that a few select women were capable of hosting the magical powers left behind by Hyne. It is also known that before any sorceress can rest in peace, that these powers must be passed on to another woman through a process known as embodiment. In-game, we are shown 3 incarnations of forgotten sorceresses from different periods in time. They are able to wield powerful magics, but nothing more is known about them. Another forgotten sorceress was likely Halicarnassus. Although never named in-game, there is plenty of evidence to support the existence of this sorceress in the ancient world of Final Fantasy VIII. Far away in the interdimensional rift, a place outside of time and space, there lies a lone floating castle. This will not be the only time you see this castle, but at this moment it is ruled over by Halicarnassus. Stories about this sorceress span across the multiverse. In the faraway world of Lapis, there exist legends which tell of a queen named Halicarnassus who was a master of strategy and a wielder of powerful magics. In yet another distant world, Heartilly, there is a story about a powerful magician known as Halicarnassus. This story is said to take place in the 4th Astral Era, and it depicts a sorceress queen who resides in a floating castle existing in a place between dimensions and outside of time. Furthermore, Halicarnassus is not the only character from the interdimensional rift to appear in Final Fantasy VIII. The wanderer Gilgamesh, who was banished to the interdimensional rift, also appears upon Odin's death at the hands of Zefer during the main storyline. While the tales of Halicarnassus may have been intentionally buried, tales of another beloved sorceress are well known throughout the world of FF8. Zefer was a knight sworn to protect an unnamed sorceress. This woman is one of the 3 prominent sorceresses in the history of the world, and she is fondly remembered by people even today. She is famous for aiding and protecting a tiny nation when the country's government had collapsed. The unnamed sorceress is so famous that a popular movie was made about her, starring Laguna Lior as Zefer, the knight who had vowed to protect her. Not much else is said about her in-game, although it is implied that the movie about her life popularized the gunblade weapon and even inspired Zefer Almsme in wanting to become a sorceress's knight. And now the sorceress Adel. She is said to be ruthless, power-hungry, and a warmonger. Even her name strikes fear in the hearts of those who lived during her reign. Adel is significantly larger than other people, towering over everyone with her flaming red hair and eyes. Her lumbering muscles and black tattoos only add to her terrifying presence. Several decades before the start of Final Fantasy VIII, Adel would push the world down a dark path of destruction. Gaining political power in her home nation of Astar, she would eventually become the nation's tyrannical ruler and start a world war in search of her successor. This war would result in many casualties and a great number of children becoming orphaned. Eventually, after being sealed away for more than a decade, Adel is finally defeated by Squall Lionheart, and at the time of her death, she passes her powers onto another young woman named Rinoa. Rinoa is the daughter of a prominent military commander and a beautiful singer. She is oftentimes compassionate, but sometimes a stubborn young woman. She would befriend multiple members of Seed and have romantic relationships with both Zefer and Squall. As a member of an activist organization, Rinoa would get entangled in Seed's grander mission of protecting the world from corrupt sorceresses. Her own magical abilities would be awakened by receiving the powers of a mortally wounded Adel at the Battle of the Lunatic Pandora. These powers would make Rinoa a sorceress, the sworn enemy of Seed. But despite this, Squall would vow to protect Rinoa as her loyal knight. At a young age, Edea chose to hide her powers away from people. The world had seen much death and destruction at the hands of Sorceress Adel, and Edea did not want to give anyone reason to hate her. Eventually, she would meet a man named Sid Kramer, to whom she could trust her secret, and the two were happy. They started an orphanage to take in children who had lost their parents during Adel's War of Conquest. After years of caring for several orphan children, including a young Squall, Edea would meet a dying sorceress on the grounds outside her orphanage. To prevent any of the children in her care from being burdened with this strange woman's powers, Edea would accept the sorceress's gifts so that the stranger could die in peace. The encounter would inspire Edea and her now husband Sid to create a military academy named Seed. The organization's purpose would be to educate and train children in case Edea herself or any other sorceress ever needed to be stopped. Edea would teach Sid how to use paramagic, and with much sorrow, Sid left his wife at the orphanage so that he could organize the funding to build the schools required to fulfill their new task. For more than a decade, the two were apart, until Edea was seen amassing political power of her own, much like the sorceress Adel had done before her. Sid dispatches a team of soldiers to investigate and, if needed, do what must be done to stop her. Eventually, Squall and team are able to overpower Edea without harming her, but many lives were lost in the ensuing battle. The team learns that Edea was being controlled by an even more powerful sorceress from the distant future, a being known as Ultimecia. At some distant point in the far future, there exists the last of a many millennia-long line of sorceresses, Ultimecia. She is an immensely powerful sorceress with abilities that can manipulate both time and space. She rules over a castle floating above a barren wasteland. This floating castle shares a striking resemblance to another castle ruled over by a former sorceress queen. Ultimecia's insane goal is to bring about time compression, so that she can recreate the world anew as its sole god. Using advanced technology, Ultimecia possesses several sorceresses in the past. She takes control of Edea Kramer to pursue political power and find a way to go even further back in time. After Edea is freed by Squall, Ultimecia goes on to possess the sorceress Adel. When Adel is killed by Squall, Ultimecia possesses Rinoa, and finally, Ultimecia is able to go even farther back in time and possess the sorceress Adel of decades past. Despite her efforts in manipulating the timeline, Ultimecia is eventually slain by Squall and the other members of Seed. As she cannot rest peacefully until she passes her sorceress powers to another, Ultimecia travels back in time and grants her powers to a younger Edea outside the orphanage that she ran. This encounter would ultimately inspire Edea to form the organization known as Seed, in which the young Squall Leonheart would eventually enlist. And with Ultimecia's death, the fate of Rinoa and any other potential sorceresses is left unknown.
I refuse.
And that is it. That is every known sorceress in the world of FF8. What do you think about this list? Did I miss anyone? Do you agree with the inclusion of Halicarnassus? Let me know in the comments either way, and as always, thanks for watching.